Welcome to the fastest daf in town. Today we'll start this Yevamot daf Lamed Zayin. We're going to begin on Lamed Zayin Amud Aleph by the two dots, about 10 lines from the top. Suffolk ben Tesha. So let's see the Mishnah, which is found on Lamed Hamid Beis. So let's say a person does Yibum with a woman who is pregnant, and it turns out that she gives birth to a healthy child, and it's a Suffolk ben Tishel Rishon Suffolk ben Shivla Acharon, which means it's possible that this is a 7-month-old baby that actually was from this new husband. And therefore, the original husband really didn't have children, the brother that died. However, it's also shaykh that it's a 9-month-old baby. It's a complete term. And it actually came from the first man, in which that means there's an Isser of Eishes Ach because there's no din yibum. So because of this constant suffix, of course before DNA, yotzi b'havalad kosher. So they have to remove themselves from this marriage, but the child, b'manav shach, is going to be kosher. Why? Because if this child belongs to the first husband, okay, so it belongs to the first husband. If it belongs to the second husband, okay. If it belongs to the second husband, that's because it was really a good yibum. However, because of this doubt, which seems like it's a total suffix, we can't lean on one side over the other. Because of that, you have to bring an asham talui, not an asham vadai. So, on this, the Gemara says as follows. The Gemara asks, Amru le Rabbi Rab Nachman, again on Lamed Zayin Amud Aleph. Lema, why don't we say that halach achar roiv nashim? We should go after the majority of women. Rob nashim latisha yaldan, and most women actually give birth to term. 9 months, 7 months is not a typical birth. It does happen, but it's not the majority. So what? So says Rashi. Therefore, if lesi chatas vadai, you actually have to bring. I said asham vadai. I mean a chatas vadai. It's an asham toli, but then if it's for sure, then you bring a chatas vadai. Bar kamahu, because probably. Devadai bar kamahu. This child is the first one because probably 9-month-old. Therefore, it's veishasach bas banim baal. You actually had bia with your brother's wife who actually had a child from him, which is usher. So you should have to bring a chatas. Why do you have to bring an asham talui only? So Amalei says you're right. Nashi didan l'shiva yaldan. This situation, we have to look at what happened. This child was born after 7 months. Amalei said, okay, Nashi didchu tavi ruba de alma. So he said, is this the majority of the world? What goes on as far as other women? So how do we assume that this is vadai? So Amalei haki kami, this is what I mean. Rov nashim yaldon latisha. You're right. And because Rov nashim give birth after 9 months, that would mean it would be the first husband. However, umiyat l'shiva, there is a minority that do give birth after 7 months, so it could be the second guy. V'chol ha'yoledes latisha, but when we deal with a person who is yoledes latisha, when it's a full term, then uber nicker l'shlish yameha, then usually after the end of the first trimester, after let's call it 3 months, so at that point, there it's uber nicker. So the question is, if Uber Nicker, then it should have been recognizable what was going on, that she was pregnant. V'zu hoyavlu hooker ubra, because the case of our Mishnah is where he did this without knowing that she was pregnant. So v'zu hoyavlu hooker ubra v'shishameha, so itra le ruba, that like weakens the rove. So you're right. Even though you're right, rove women give birth at 9 months, but since they give birth at 9 months, usually it's hooker uber. And this is not a case of hooker uber, and therefore because of that, Rashi says this, so that's how we know. So Itra Ruba says Rashi, we don't go basar rov, el safek basar miyad safek basar rov. And therefore, it's an equal suffix, and that's why you have to bring an asham talui. If it's true that all women at 9 months, it's hooker, it's recognizable, all of them, right? So hamidalo hooker l'shlish yameha the ubravadi bar shiva lebasrahu. It's a raya, no greater proof that it obviously belongs to the second husband. So at least in this Havamina, it's everyone who has 9 months, it's hooker uber. So the fact that it's not hooker uber, obviously it was the 7 month belongs to the second husband. El ima rov. So this is actually how you're supposed to read it. Rov. The majority hill is Latisha uber nikr l'sheshemeha. It's not all, because if it was all, then it would be obvious. But it's the majority. Behind the hooker shlishemeha itole ruba. Okay. Tanamon. Rishon. Now the first child, because we said Mamanavshach, the Safek Havi says Rashi, Roy Leos Kohen Gadol Mamanavshach. This child is Roy Leos Kohen Gadol either way, because it either belongs to the first husband, he's fine, they were married before he died, or the second man, the brother, which means that the first brother didn't have kids and was a good yibum. So this child is totally kosher to the point that he can become Kohen Gadol. Hasheni. Mamzer Mesafek. The second one is the Mamzer Mesafek. So what does that mean? It says Rashi, Im Kaima Ad Sheyodolo Ben Vadai. Mamzer Mesafek. So let's say if she remains married until she ends up giving birth to a child, which is definitely, it doesn't mean just a second, it means any child afterwards, it's a Mamzer Mesafek. Shemarishon Ben Hameshabi, because if the first child was really the first husband's, that means v'koyel v'hebekaris. That means you never have a right to remain married in this situation, because as the Mishnah says, yoitzi, you have to leave the marriage. But let's say you have a child before you left, this comes from a chayvi krisos, because this is Eishes Achshel B'Makam Mitzvah, Eish Sheishlo Bonim, at least it's a suffix that he has children, and therefore the second children are considered to be a Mamzer Masafik. Rabbi Lezer ben Yaakov Omer Ein Mamzer Masafik. He says, no, that's not the case. So my Kaimer says Rashi, what does it mean where Rabbi Lezer ben Yaakov says this? Heichi Matzi Lafuki Masafik Mamzer. What do you mean? It seems like it's obvious that it's going to be a suffix. Mamzer. So Rabbi explains like this. Hachi Kaimer. Rishon Roilius Kohen Gadol, as we established. The Sheni Safek Mamzer. The Aser B'Mamzeres. This second child is a Mamzer, but not totally, because we don't know for sure. Because again, it could be that the first child really belongs to the second husband, and therefore was a good yibum, and therefore they could technically be having more kids, and everything would be fine. But that's because it's a suffix mamzer, it's aser b'mamzeres. A suffix cannot marry a mamzeres who is a vade mamzeres. Rabbi Lezer Omer eno suffix mamzer el vade mamzer muter b'mamzeres. We actually will label this child not as a suffix mamzer, rather the level of a mamzer vadai. Well, that sounds horrible. Not really, because umuter b'mamzeres. Now we say that he's able to now marry mamzeres, because Rashi says the ksaver sveiken bevadon mutter. The reality is, of course, it is a suffix, but we make it in the fact that he's even allowed to marry mamzeres vadai. So that's the pshana bai. That it doesn't mean that it's not that it's he disagrees, but he says the chiluk is that he allows a suffix mamzer to marry mamzeres. Rabbi disagreeing with the bias says like this. Hachikamer Rishon really always going gadol. So that again we can't disagree with. V'sheni mamzer vadai. But what we do is we make this sheni into a vadai mamzer. Misafek. Umater b'mamzeres. Rabbi Lezer ben Yaakov Omer ein vadai mamzer misafek. We don't make him into a mamzer, a vadai, el suffix mamzer. He's a suffix. V'aser b'mamzeres, and actually he's usher to marry mamzeres. So this is the different way of reading it. According to the sheet of Rava, he says, no, I'm not allowing a suffix to marry mamzeres. A suffix cannot marry mamzer. So the machlokus is the sheet of Rabbi Lezer did not, as we saw in the fourth and final parak of Masechtas Kedushin, Ditnan, it says over there as follows: Rabbi Lezer Oimer Vadan bevadan mutter. Only a mamzer to a mamzeris, one who's definitely a mamzeris. Only that relationship, because it's lo yavu b'kal Hashem. So because of that, we allow them and only them to marry into each other. Vada misveikin b'vada, misveikin misveikin aser. However, a doubt to a vadai or vice versa, or a doubt to a doubt, we say it is aser for them to get married. Ve'elhin sveikon shtuki asufi v'kusi. So you have a shtuki in which we don't know the status of the father, or an asufi who's gathered like an abandoned child, so we don't know the status of the father or the mother, or a kusi, in which there's a whole discussion of Gary Arayos, or Gary MS. So those are cases of sveikos. So according to Shita Rebbe Lezer, a suffix cannot marry a vadai. So therefore, that's the whole machlokas over here. Do we allow a suffix, in this case, the second child, who's a suffix, to marry to the vadai? V'yam Rabbi Yehuda Marav halacha Rebbe Lezer. Halacha taka is like this shita, that we only allow a vadi to a vadai. Ki amrisa gamei Shmuel Amrli Hillel Shana Asar Yochsen Olam Mebavel, which is the name of the fourth parak, that you had 10 different categories of people: Kohanim, Levim, Yisraelim, again others as well, as we're going to see now. They went from Bavel, including Kohani, Levi, Yisraeli, Chalali, again, which is like a Ben Grushman Chalutz we saw before, Gary, Converts, Haruri, freed slaves, Mamzeri, Nesini, the Gavoinim, Shtuki Vyasufi, Vikulan, Mutar and Levo Zebazeh. All of them are allowed to marry one another, says Rashi. Iamrit sveiken bavadei mutter. If you want to tell me a suffix to a vadi is mutter, v'koshkein sveiken b'sveiken, that even a suffix to a suffix is mutter. Hainu de mishkachas lo kuan mutter zebazeh. That's how we can understand that they're mutter to one another, and it's okay. V'yad amrit halacha Rebbe Lezer. How could you say the halacha is like Rebbe Lezer, that you tell me that it's only a vadai mamzer to another mamzeris is mutter, but a vadai to a suffix not? So these are cases, some of them are vadai, some of them are suffix, and we find apparently that they were allowed to marry into each other, which the Gemara, of course, discusses that at greater length, how the Mishnah actually breaks into different parts. So, Geri Harur Mamzer Nesini Shtuk Vesufim Matom Zevazeh. It doesn't mean that Kohanim, Levim, Yisrael are allowed to marry them. Rashi says Ger, Charu, Mamzer, and Asina Shtuki, Asufi are allowed to Kahal Gerim will Ikri Kahal. And since Kahal Gerim is Lo Ikri Kahal, that's why Gerim are in that same category. Afikach Mamzer Mutarin Behen. Fine. So how could you tell me the Halachas Rebbe Lezer, says Rashi, She'ein Mamzer Mutar B'Shtuki, V'lo B'Shtuki B'Shtuki, V'lo Shtuki B'Asufi? How can you tell me that? L'chayr it's allowed. Okay. Abaye Sabalok Shmuel. So Abaye, who said above, again, Abaye and Rav, the two interpretations how to understand the Shita, Abaye said that according to Rebbe Lezer, he holds that a suffix is not allowed to marry a vadai, but we say that this second child is considered to be like a suffix mamzer, but we allow him nonetheless to marry mamzeris in that circumstance. So by Savel Kishmol, the Amr Halacha Kehillel, he said that the halacha is like Hillel, again, as we just saw, that we allow a suffix and a vadai to marry each other. And he wanted to establish a Rebbe Lezer and Yankov Liba de Hilchasa. That is our goal, to be able to say things like Liba de Hilchasa. Because we don't want to end up having questions and contradictions on one halacha to the other. Rav Sabla Karav. Rav, on the other hand, said that a suffix to a vada is not allowed. So therefore, Rav Sabla Karav. Yerma halacha Rebbe Lezer, that halacha is like Rebbe Lezer that does not allow it, unlike the Mishnah, right? As we continue to Lamed Zayin Bebeis, Hilchasa. Okay, stop there for a second. Let's look at question TB 22. Savik ben Tishel Rishon. Yoitzi v'vlad kosher b'chayav m'asham tali. My nafkamina Ma shehukshu begemara sheneled acharoiv noshim dulates yoldan mandu beemes lo hoichen achar haroiv. So as we said, because even though you would l'chayr go basarov, but again, there's also this notion that any child who's carried to term should also, this is TB22, it should also be Uber's nicker, at least it's a rove that way, and therefore it cancels it out. Otherwise, if it was otherwise, then it would not be a suffix, and then you have to bring a chatos. Let's see how he writes this. Imaz lin basar rove do a test yoldan socha heavy chatos, not an asham tali. Kivan de Rav Yoldas Latisha Uber Nicker L'Shlish Yameha Zushel Hooker Itula Rumba. Okay. That was TB 22. Okay. Question 3. Suffolk ben Tisha Rishon Amai Havi Suffolk V'Hari Roiv Nashim Latisha Vladan V'Im Kain Ben Larishon Hu. So again, it's not necessarily for sure it's the first child, the first husband, because then it should have been Uber Nicker. So it's question 3, and TB 22 is actually identical to it. Okay, let's continue now in Laman Zayin with Beis. So the Gemara says as follows: Omer Rabbi, Mina Minala. How do I, Abaye, know, as he said before, that a suffix to a vadai is mutter? So let's see, like he held. But no, minula the whole sveka Rabbi Lezer and Yaakov kevada mishavila doesn't mean it's really a vada. It just means that in this case, this child who's a suffix mamzer is allowed to marry a vadai. So how do we know that? So by the way, I'm looking at this Rashi Hilchasa because we paskin like Rabbi Lezer and Yaakov because he's kavan noki. That's brought down Masechtas Gittin. His words are very clean. So there we usually hold like him. So on this, he asked the kasha, how do we know that this is the din, the suffix Mary Vadai? The sign, Rabbi Lezer ben Yaakov Oimer, Harishaba al Nashim Harbe. A person had tashmish with numerous women, but he doesn't know which one. The Chain he Shabal Leha Nashim Harbe. So too, a woman does the same. The Enu Yodas Me'ezmehem Kibla, and she doesn't know which one she was Kibla, says Rashi, Nisabra. She doesn't know which man impregnated her. Nimsa av noisias bito. So we find that the father marries the daughter. The ach noisias achoso, and the brother marries the sister. V'nis maliko kulu mamzerim. V'al zen nemer arts zima. Says Rashi. V'nis maliko kulu mamzerim esafek kari lahu mamzerim. So what do we see? Again, l'chayra, it's showing that a suffix can marry a vadai, but he said that that's what the problem. Zu mahi, zima means zu mahi. It's just saying that it's a lashon of suffix. Yasser Kain Amar Belezer ben Yaakov lo yisa adam isha ben Medina zu. A person should not marry a woman in one country. V'yelch v'yisa isha ben Medina acheres. They should go and marry another woman in another country. Shemi is davgu zelazeh, because what happens if they come to one another? V'nimsa ach noisei asachoso. So what ends up happening again? B'safek, maybe the brother is going to end up marrying a sister. So because if you marry one place, it's going to cause tremendous confusion. It says Rashi, Yasser al Kain. Afil hacha de alidei nesuin havi. Even they got married, v'davar meforsam goes Rabbi Lezer ben Yaakov. He said that's not allowed. Eini, what do you mean? You can't go to another city and get married? V'ho rav ki ikala l'dardashir machris. When he ever went to this place, he would make the announcement. There was an announcement made before. Man havi l'yoyma. Man habel yomo, who can come for this day? Says Rashi, Mi chafetza linosel yomim shnis akiv kan. Since this great rabbi is coming here, who's going to marry him for a day? Rav Nachman ki ikla lekishin siv machos v'yomer man habi liyomo, who's coming today? So shouldn't that still be the problem? They're having tashmish with these women. They're not going to know the status of these kids. They're not going to know who this woman's not going to know the other women's kids, etc. So it'll end up becoming a problem. Shtani Rabbanan Divkia Shemayhu. So says Rashi, Kuli Alma B'Shemayhu V'Karin Levito Al Shemay. V'im Yavo B'no Makam Achar Yishma Shehi Bas Aviv Yifresh. Basically, because these are great people, and therefore, because of their fame, people are going to know, and therefore it's not going to cause any potential issues of doubt. Yamarava Tavu Linase V'Nispaisa Sriach Leisha Shiva Nikim. It says Rashi, you have to wait seven clean days. Shema machmas chimud perisanida shinis paisa. The question is that this woman, once she finds out, then lochar she has to be perisanida anyway. She's a nida. So Rabbanan shlochaihu. In other words, if he came on that day, which is what in the Havamina we're thinking, the answer is no. It's not that he came that day and he found out about, wow, this great rabbi, and therefore it potentially could cause her to see nidos. Rabbanan shulchaihu havi mishadri umoidulhu. What happened is they told people in advance that they're coming. So this way, they already had it all prepared 7 days before he arrived. So even if she saw nida, she'd be clean for the day that he comes. The truth is, what happened, they never had tashmish with these women. All it was a potential yichud. You can be miyachid with your wife, even if she's a nida. So there's no issue of suffix potentially that will happen in this case, because they never end up having tashmish with these women, but it's just in the event that they could, it's allowed. But they never did. But at least that's the whole reason. At least they had this way. They had literally bread in their basket. Pas basal. Taner Belezer ben Yaakov Aimer Yisa Adam Ishto. A person should not marry a woman, but daitel garsha, and his intention is to divorce her. Mishum shneimar al tachrosh al reyacha ra. That you should not do evil. So let's see, is Rashi explaining this, B'chlal? No. Okay. So now the Gemara discusses numerous cases of what to do if there's a debate. You have this child who's a suffix. Okay, so you have this child from this Yibum. We don't know if it belonged to the first father or the second. And you have the Yavam, and you have the father. Misna, and there's a debate because they want to be able to divide up or take. Each one wants to take the property. So Suffolk Omer Ana Bar Misnahu. So regarding the father who died, so this suffix says that's my dad. The Nixedidihu, because we know that the Yerusha goes to the child before the sibling. So their suffix is going to say that money all belongs to me because I belong to I'm the product of the first husband, the first father. Therefore, the money should go to me. The other one says, no, you're my son. Didi at he has no children, and I am Yorish, and therefore I'm the one who gets all of his money. So I So we know that when it's a doubt, so you split it up, 50-50. Okay, says Rashi, because it's a whole suffix, no one has a chazaka of one over the other. If this child really belongs to the mace, then the other brother gets nothing. If actually this was the second husband, the second brother's child, so then the child gets nothing. You can't apply haraya over here. All you do is say it's moment of multiple suffix cholkin. So now we discuss the second case. Suffix, again, you have this child who we don't know if this child is from the first man or the second, and then you have uvnei yavam. and you have children from the Yavam. In other words, this man has children from the second man has a second son. Misna. Again, they want to divide up the possessions of the first brother. Now, so let's assume, let's say they don't have a father anymore. The father died. So the question is, does it go to the first son or the second son? So Safik Omer Hu Gavar Bar Misnahu. Of course, he's going to say that I am actually the rightful heir because the possessions belong to my father's, because I was actually married. I was actually the product of the first relationship. However, Bnei Yavam Amri, the Bnei Yavam were going to say, Atachinuat, you're our brother, and therefore you have an equal share with us. Umisanahu the islach bahadon, and therefore you have an equal portion together with us. Now, the other brothers are not claiming he gets nothing in this case. They're saying that you shouldn't get everything, but we should split this up evenly. Let's say there's two other children. So some Rabban committed around Mishar Shalom Amar Masnisani. So you say l'chayra, this is a case of a Mishnah. So basically what this is saying up until now is, let's look at this Rashi. Diktani Safik ben Tishel Rishon, Safik ben Shiva Acharon, Hu lo Yarish Oisan lo Zev lo Zeh, Divnei Rishon Manchule Eitzel b'nei Acharon, B'nei Acharon Eitzel b'nei Rishon, Teim Yarshim Oisan ben Shnehem. So, in other words, what's happening over here? We'll continue with this next piece of the Gemara in a second. Is let's say we divide the Yerusha into three parts. So the Safek gets a third right off the bat, because he for sure gets something based on his claim, and then you have 2/3 left, and then they'll divide the rest up evenly. Which means that that would mean that the brothers would get 2/3, would get 1/3. Okay, did not. Who enu yarish oisam? So we'll look at this. If the Safek child is there, he's not going to be yarish from them. The him yarishim oiso, but they're yarish for him. The hacha ivcha. Here's the opposite. Hasa amrule aisi rayu shkoil. Go and prove to me that you have the right, and then you can take. Hacha omrul, who here the Safek could say, so the Safek maybe actually gets everything. In that case, over there, we're talking about a situation where one was a Vadai, one was a Safek. Here, there's both of them, there's a Safek. If anyone is muksuk, we don't see that one is necessarily muksuk over the other. Now, maybe we want to compare it to the case of the Safek and the Yavam, which we just talked about, with the second son. Here, what they want to do is they want to be chaylik the nechse Yavam. So gufa the hasam amrile isiraya diachune at ushkoil. So the other two brothers can say, I don't think you're our brother, and therefore we want the possessions. We're going to keep the possessions for ourselves. You need to prove that you're actually our brother. Otherwise, forget it. Safek, period. So what happened in this situation? Fine, that's it. So Safek ubnei Yavam shibolach v'nechse Yavam. So again, what happened? We're talking about the case of a Safek going against the Bnei Yavam, the children of the Yavam, and the Yavam died. So Labasa the Pala Yavam, after they divided it up, because let's say they thought, okay, we'll divide it up, V'nechse Misna, they split the property of the possession of the other father first. But the Yavam Amri Aisiraya De'achunat Yishkoil. So 1 second. So let's say both of them died, the two fathers. So, and all the Yerusha was divided 50-50. So they can say 1 second. Prove to me that you're our brother, then you can take for the other half. Armulhu Safek. So the son can say Manavshaychu. I can tell you Mamanashach. If we're brothers, Havale Masana Bahadaihu, then we'll split it up. V'ibar Misnana, if let's say I belong to the first one, then Havali Palga, the Palig Avuchain Bahadadi. So I should take half, and you guys will take half, and you'll split the half among the two of you. But at least I should be able to get my portion because of the suffix that I was actually from the first father. So if the first father died and his brother, father number 2, was, let's say, Yarish all, then father number 2 dies, so Mamanav Shach, this suffix should get either a half or to be mechalik with his brothers. Rav Abba Oimer Rav Kam Dina. So the question is, the fact that Kam Dina, says Rashi, Achar Shenasa Din Ben Nechse Hames, since they already took din regarding the possessions of the mace, you can't complain about it and to try to get it back. Rav Yirmi Oimer Hadar Dina, you could always retract. Says Rashi, Mahadri le Palga the Nechse Misna or Pal Kulum Nechse Shava. That actually we could go back and retract from the original case. So Leiman Bapota de Adman V'Rabbanon. Let's say whether or not you can retract is based on this other similar and related machlokus between Admoin and the Rabbanon. Kemefagi that not. Misha halach Medina Siyam. So you have this guy who went to another country, V'Avdoloi Derech Sadeu, and he had a middle field, and he lost the path. Says Rashi, Shahaisa Sadeu Mukefes Mitzados Acherim. So it's basically surrounded by other fields. And he had a path to be able to go basically through these outer fields to get to his property. But because he went to another country and he came back, he got confused and lost. So the question is, what do we do now? How's he going to get to his field? So Admon Oimer Yelch B'Kitsara. Admon says, you know what? Let him at least cut through in the most basic path, and that is acceptable. Either let him spend an absorbent amount of money to be able to purchase a path, or let him fly in the air, which of course is not happening, but the point is that it's unfortunate, where there's nothing you can do about it. And we ask the question, Rabbanan Shaperkeimer Admoin. Rabbanan, according to Rabbanan, Shaperkeimer Admoin. Says Rashi, the kasalka daitach shekifu adam echad mikol ruchaisav. The oimer urchi gabehu, that all the properties on the outskirts, let's say all around, belong to one other guy. So he can say, you know what, Shaperkeimer Admon. Admon is actually saying good because obviously I had a field, and I have a field in the middle, and you own property all around in every direction, but I had a path. So what's the difference if it's this path or that path, right? You should give me, because for sure that I have a path in one of your properties. So why would they be so, or they have to purchase it or float in the air? The problem is that each person is going to say, no, the path didn't go in my field. So there's like 4 different people. So that's where the issue is. So So why would Admon say that you can just go the most direct path? Well, you may be cutting through someone else's property. So Rabbi qualifies this a lot. He says this. But Arba, the Asamikayach Arba. If, let's say, you have 4 different people, and they're coming Mikayach Arba, says Rashi, what does that mean? Arba b'nei Adam. Again, each person is coming Mikayach Arba. Sha'arba Nashim Moichim Elu. They had 4 people that sold the property to these guys. So you had 4 different transactions from 4 different people. And so it was totally disconnected, the original owner and the seller. Or let's see, for that matter, if you have 4 that are coming Mekayachad from one person, in that situation, you certainly could push him off. because you can say, well, I purchased this property from a separate person, or all four people, the land belongs to four different people. The whole machlokus is if there's only one owner. Let's say it came from four different people, but now there's only one owner. Admon savar matar molim mikol makom darchi gaboch. Who you can say well, you're the only owner here, so I should be able to go through a path. Rabbanat Sabri di Armalei Ishaklis Ishaskas. If you're silent, then be silent, says Rashi. I'm not going to charge you a lot of money. If not, I'm going to return the star back to its original owner. And you will not be able to do din with me. So basically, you could say I'm just going to return everything back, which means apparently, according to this shita, you could retract on your original whatever the din was. So lema Rav Avdi Admon Karabanan. Become Admoin. Some Rav Abba Diarmefil Admoin. Ad Kanol Kamer Admoin. Only here did Admon say that you can go through one path. Hasam Elamisham Diarmalei Mamanavshach. Again, you can say it's Mamanavshach. You're the only guy that owns these fields, as we continue on Mechasam Aleph, and therefore Darki Chad Gabachu. It's just your field, right? And therefore it's a Tainus Bari. You have a strong claim in this situation. Could you say such a thing? Says Rashi. You don't know when we're talking about this case of a suffix, of adai. You don't know what the claim is. If let's say the possessions belong to the father, so you should get half. So you can always say, bring me your proof on either side. Fine. Rabbi Yomi or Melach Anna de Amri Afil or Rabbanan. Ad kan lo kamer Rabbanan hasam that the field you can't make a path. I'm just going to bring it back to the owner. And the owners are four. And therefore, since there's four different people, then you won't have this claim. So you can't say, you only won. Okay, fine. So I'll return all four of them. And then you're going to be in trouble either way. So you won't be able to do anything about it because he technically can just do this. But here, can he say such a thing? You can't throw this suffix child away entirely since he is entitled to something. Okay, stop there. Let's see a couple of questions. Question 4. Mishalach Medina Siyam V'avdul Derech Sedehu Ma Din Bofanim L'Halon. What are the dinim? Chad Yasmi Koyach Chad. So Chad Koyach Chad. You definitely have to give him the path. Okay. If it's Arba Mikoyach Arba or Arba Mikoyach Chad, if you have four, they're coming from four coming from four, there's nothing to talk about. You can say, I'm sorry, I'm not dealing with this, right? You have to purchase it. Also, 4 Mikoyach Chad, if you have 4 that came from the koyach of one original seller, so again, doesn't matter, but you have 4 different people that own the property, so you can again still say the same thing, Yikdu, to acquire it. The machlokas Admon the Rabbanon is a case of Chad Mikoyach Arba. If you have Chad, one owner, but it came Mikoyach Arba, whether or not this din works. Okay, so that is the machlokas. Again, this is really from another Masechta, but nonetheless, that's the question, number 4. Okay. Okay. Let's see if there's another question from TB. Safek Uvnei Yavam, so which we mentioned before. Shibol Chalik Menechse Saba Mahadin. I'm not sure if we did Saba. I think that's going to be the next daf. Nechse Saba. Okay, that'll be on the next daf. TA 20. Safek Uvnei Yavam Benechse Yavam Mahadin Umadua. So you have a suffix against the Bnei Yavam, Menechse Yavam. So mahadin umadua. So the answer is hasavik ini yorish. In this situation, the savik can't get anything. Then savik moitzi midi vadai, because the brothers definitely get something. The other ones can say, "Bring me a raya that you're our brothers, and then you can take together with us." Adkan.